system where like
Recall?
anyone with a lot of gen could just come in and like do a griefing attack on anyone, so they lose like whatever gen they have staked. You know.
So you don't lose. Yeah, just so everybody knows, the recording is now on, and to address that, so you don't lose the gen that you stake if the proposal isn't actually boosted. So if it simply expires, everybody who staked is refunded there, or can get their gen back. Is that what you're saying? Or are you talking about griefing the DAO by spamming?
Oh. Yeah, that's more so what I was saying, but I guess if they don't get any gen, like if they don't have a reward for it, I guess there's no reason to do that.
Yeah, there's no good reward for just outbidding somebody or something. It actually depends on how the vote goes.
Yeah, that makes sense then. That makes a lot more sense.
Yeah, I'm actually excited about this because I think this is going to encourage people to learn about DAOstack and pay attention to the mechanics of how holographic consensus works, and then like how the DAO works and voting. So it looks like somebody downstaked it, now somebody upstaked it again, and it's now back into the pending boosting state. This is another thing I don't love about the UI, is that it's broken into 3 sections under the where you click onto a plugin, and the bottom one says regular proposals, and then it's pending and boosted. Regular to me is a weird name because really these are 3 different states of all the same types of, these are all funding and voting power proposals, and there's 3 states it can be in. One is just like the unboosted state. That's like what is under regular. And then there's the pending boosting state and then the actual boosted state. And now any proposal can pass immediately when absolute majority is reached. And this is actually I say absolute majority, but there's actually like a voting threshold that is specified per plugin. You can see that in the information. It is 50%, I think, for all the DXdao plugins. And so any, no matter whether it's under boosted, pending, or regular, if it hits 50%, immediately it passes, right? Where the pending and the boosting come into play is enabling the relative majority. So if something is boosted, it can then pass by relative majority, but that doesn't happen. It has to have, how to word this, that is judged at the end of a certain period, right? Like, so there's a certain voting period that gets opened when something is boosted. For the main continuous voting one, it is 7 days. So what could happen? So right now, if nobody stakes or downstakes on this halting the bonding curve proposal, it's set to become boosted in a little under 24 hours. And then there would be 7 days during which voting can happen. And at the end of that 7 days, it's either going to fail or pass based on which has more votes. Yeah, Augusto, we could probably talk about that. I don't think we have we have the normal stuff on the agenda, and we could talk about that stuff. But I'm gonna, so I don't know. We can talk more about the voting too if that's on people's minds. But just to get going with the normal agenda, Caden, do you want to just provide an open update?
Yeah. So. Actually, I better check the status of the proposal, but 1.1.4 proposal should be almost gone through with the content hash. So I'm not sure actually how far along that is.
It looks like it's gonna pass in about a day.
Okay. Yeah, so then that should go through, and then meanwhile we're working on 1.1.5 and working on making changes to the subgraph. And looking at putting together a roadmap as well for that. Yeah.
Nice. Okay.
Hey, John, where do you see the thing that proposal is going to pass in a day? Is that on the same thing we're looking at?
I'm actually looking at just if you click on proposals and you see all the plugins, if you go to the generic, you scroll down so you can see generic scheme ENS public resolver. I actually just see it. I'm seeing it right there. You could click in there and also see it, but you can actually see it at the overall view. It shows the boosted proposals, I guess, in this view. And you can see the amount of time left on that boosted proposal. Do you see what I'm saying?
Oh, on the main proposals plugins page, is it in the under like generic scheme ENS public resolver?
Yeah, this is a little confusing because there are two
Really
schemes for ENS due to the two, the migration that ENS had. There's actually two different ones. One I think is actually, I think we're done using the public provider one, and that could probably be removed. But yeah, under the public resolver one, you can see the two boosted proposals. There's one for the latest release of Omen. There's one for the latest release of Mesa. And on the right side there, you see the amount of time remaining for that boosted period.
Yeah. So this is related to my question yesterday. So like, should we all vote on that? Like, should 20 of us vote on that? Or like one person already voted and it's going to pass in one day?
I mean, especially for something that I feel is like not particularly contentious, like a minor release to the product. I think it's great that everybody should pay attention to these votes. But if the vote is going the way you think it should go, personally, I don't see a lot of incentive to like also spend, especially today with high gas fees, like to spend the $10 or whatever to also put your vote in.
Yeah.
Okay, so then moving along, there's also been another release of Mesa. A couple updates there, fixes a couple of like edge case bugs. Some people were having, it's kind of an edge case, but some people were having trouble claiming. It fixes that. There's also a confirmation modal for new orders, so that people are confirming the price. As even with the updates, I guess there's still been some reports of issues that are people just making mistakes, and perhaps because the design is a little unconventional or not quite what people are used to with order book exchanges. Also with Mesa, it was an interesting week because there was an IDO that occurred, which DXdao had, no communication really about. Ingemar, I think you had actually tried to make some contact with the team,
Yep.
and they kind of shot you down, which is rude. And then they did not communicate with the team prior to the sale. They ran the sale, and apparently they screwed something up and set the prices too high. And then some people, probably in the heat of the moment, bought at these really high prices at the IDO, and then there's all this negative feedback now, and it's like potentially impacting other people, like this perpetual, I forget the full name, perpetual something project that may be using Mesa. And personally, I was just like hoping we'd see, I think Ancho actually already provided it in the Keybase, but just confirmation from some of the Gnosis engineers that there was in fact no problem with Gnosis protocol or Mesa, which I don't think there was. I think there was no actual technical issues for the platform. And now that we, have confirmation on that, I think it would be great if we communicate something to the world that's just, something common, like to the effect of, the proper way to do this is this, and Mesa, and reassert that Mesa is working fine, Gnosis protocol working fine. It still makes sense as the venue for IDOs, and just help make sure people still have faith in that. So yeah, I think that's it. Does anybody have anything else they wanted to add on Mesa?
Well, in terms of preventing something like that, I think we should. I don't know what we actually do currently, but I think it's good to implement kind of what Uniswap does, where if you have they have a set token list, and then kind of if someone adds token, it'll have this big warning. It's kind of like, you know what I'm talking about?
I do know what you're talking about. Uniswap has a warning that, in fact, you have to see it with DXD. You have to paste in the address, and there's a big little modal that pops up and says, we don't know what this is, and you're like, agree that you're taking the risk with this.
And even after you add it, they always give you the option to remove it whenever you're trying to do it. I think we should just. I think Uniswap has kind of shown the way of how to quote, be permissionless, allow these things to happen, but kind of have some basic level of caution. And I guess there's a proactive stance and I guess not proactive. If we just have a curation list, right? If you just have, these are all the good things, that's one way. Or second is like going out of our way to say, we don't know about this one, putting the warning on that. And I guess Uniswap does the warning, and that could be more effective, right? Because then projects would want to approach the DXdao purely to be like, we want to get this warning label off of our token on this site. And that, could be a thing that would bring them into the fold more.
Yeah, absolutely. We can put that, I think, as a feature request on, like, there's no reason we can't add that for Mesa, and we should. And I actually had a call to also, like, on the topic of Mesa and Gnosis Protocol, I had a call this morning with someone from Gnosis and confirmed that they are working on a proposal to the DXdao on, how to align incentives between Gnosis Protocol, and like DXdao and Mesa, and so looking forward to eventually seeing something from them. Although I think there's a couple ideas. I'm not sure exactly what approach they may take. I suspect it'll have something to do with GNL, but we'll see. We have to just wait and see from them. Okay, moving on, I guess, unless anybody has anything else on Mesa. Okay, go to Augusto. Do you want to update on DXSwap?
Yeah, sure. I'm going to share the topic on DAO Talk that I created with version 0.2.0. So it was deployed on Koban with all the changes needed. Also, now we are calculating like the swap fees and the protocol fees. Important stuff is that we are showing the swap fee when you are trading swapping tokens in the protocol, and then the liquidity fee, which is, we call it protocol fee, when you add and remove liquidity. I share there what I have done, the next steps that are going to be taken, that is deploying to Koban alongside with the DXdao on Koban. That is still that also the DXdao on Koban is required by Pepo to start testing the wiki he developed. And yeah, that's the next thing that I'm going to be working for the next week. If there you can enter and test it. There is a link to the tokens that you can use for testing. They have funny names like Wino, Chinos, something like that. They are all registered pools. You can go there, use it. If you need Koban for testing, you can just send me your address and I send you Koban. Yeah, thanks Sky. He reported some issues. So if you guys can go ahead and test it, I know there is already a lot of people is required for, maybe we can change the colors, like have a new palette of colors. I literally don't care. We can use any color we want. The dark mode works fine. And yeah, that's it. Go ahead, test it. I think it's very important that we test it right now, that we feel how it works. And anything that you guys see that any change that you want to propose, just comment on the topic that is shared, or like Sky did, that he created the issues, and then I'm going to fix them or maybe make the changes if they are accepted by the community.
Yeah, and just to add on, Augusto gave a great presentation on Tuesday at the dev call on that. It was really just kind of exciting to see that live, and also have a call tomorrow at 11 to discuss strategy launch. And it would be great actually if we could probably just do like another demo of it again, just to see if anyone has any questions. We got to get the testing of it, and that'll just tomorrow at 11 a.m. East Coast US time.
And I don't know if maybe now is the time to kind of cover, like, if you wanted to recap the last week's call at all.
Kind of. Yeah, so last Friday was kind of first time I kind of had a DX swap, almost not just from the technical side, but more of like, okay, kind of how it's rolling out. And to me, there were kind of three big things discussed. One is liquidity mining, and to be honest, I think we're kind of still all over there. There's interest, but there's kind of a lot of ideas flowing out there, and things are changing a lot. That I think that we're still figuring out what exactly to do. Two is fees and just the fee structure and kind of how that's. If you think about that, that'll be just like some difference with Uniswap and be noticeable. And then three is on content and strategy and just kind of positioning it as I guess forking Uniswap and kind of being open with that and kind of tying it into decentralization, tying it into, I think, the open source movement in general, and also kind of linking it back to fork this too, right? Just kind of how forks can kind of go all the way down. So kind of thinking about the content and strategy there, and then just like kind of one more thing to add on in terms of kind of the liquidity mining. The strategy or kind of partnership angle is thinking about what specific pairs can DXswap go after to try to drive liquidity in the early stage. And so still working on how exactly to do that. But I think liquidity mining would be a part of that.
Also, in terms of product feedback, I noticed that somebody made a comment on the DAO Talk post this morning with some ideas there too. I haven't really had a chance to digest it. Van saying in the chat, we should be focused on very few pairs. I personally like that idea as well, to kind of, be tactical basically and focus on what we can win. Because in a way, this is with DEXs, it's a war on liquidity, because with more liquidity, you can provide better prices, and better prices attract more users, right? So
yeah, should we come up with an idea of how much funding from DXdao to put in when it initially launches, like the actual numbers? What is a good, safe amount?
Yeah, I think that would be a great topic for the DXswap call. And and just to kind of like at a high level, things to consider. The thing too with Uniswap is you have to match the amount of ether that you put in, right? So that may somewhat limit what makes sense to send from the treasury. But
although it kind of would be a fundraising tool in a way.
Right. In a way, you're
DXD goes up,
selling DXD when the price goes up. You're buying it when the price goes down.
Right. Yeah. No, the only thing, Sky, we did kind of like 2 or 3 weeks ago put some initial numbers on that, but that was like the first time we talked about it, and B, I think the treasury is like a little bit bigger now. I think that's talk about it tomorrow, and then maybe that will roll in with like the treasury discussion on the allocation for that. But that's that was like the doc I just shared is the old liquidity mining notes that we worked with, I think, starting from last week. And then just to, I think it was Van Mortals or someone, or no, John, the post about the, I guess it was like a skin on top of Uniswap or something. It was trying to provide better services. I think that's a good example of like something that should be able to just integrate with DXswap from the beginning and try to, thinking about those like not really partners. Right now, they're really just aggregators, right? The aggregators and some wallets are really the only people that kind of like plug in to Uniswap and obviously some trading systems. But just thinking about those systems that DXswap could just plug in because they're completely agnostic to anything but price. And like, if you have the best price, DXswap has the best liquidity, then it'll just slowly build that. So I don't know if this skin itself can be something that lives on top of DXswap or feeds into it, but I think those like secondary or integrations are also kind of important for carving out liquidity in those pairs.
And Bodan's asking in the chat, about potentially implementing Mooniswap's feature. Mooniswap's a new AMM released by 1inch, and yeah, Augusto's saying, maybe in the future, basically. And yeah, I mean, this Mooniswap is very new, right? It's been released in the last few weeks, and the DX swap has been being worked on for a couple of months. So I think, first things first, it takes time to integrate and figure out these things. But in the long run, it's certainly possible to, adapt the feature set, fork other protocols as well. Anything else on DXswap?
No, there is a lot of stuff that we need to discuss. I don't want to throw more things that we need to discuss here on this call, but yeah, join tomorrow call to talk about DXswap.
Sounds great. Yeah, it's great that we have that dedicated call. The last thing on the Ingemar, go ahead.
Okay. We have at least 2 really interested projects that are interested in IDOing on Mesa and potentially being like the first DEX liquidity pool being on DXswap. And I think that would be really big. That would bring 2 communities over. We have exclusivity on these token pairs. That'll draw attention. They'll say, oh, what else is on there? DXD, cool. Oh, Ether, cool. Oh, USDC, cool. And I think that's really important. So we also have I'm also in a group of DXD investors, and they have connections with other projects that they would like to bring on board. So we could really open the floodgates when we have alignment with them, and it's kind of a separate issue. I know that they have some criticism on the DX Trust curve, but we can have two. We can get started with the IDOs as soon as we know when the launch date of DXswap is, the date, and we can vote the tokens into the Mesa registry. So I'm just saying, I'm trying to coordinate as soon as I know that information, and as soon as I know that the DXdao is pretty much down with those, with Aluna Social and deeper network.
That's great. Oh, I'm sorry.
Perp, the proactive
perpetual swap. Yeah. What is it called?
Perp, I think.
Perpetual swap.
Definitely. I think with the IDOs, especially trying to get them involved, that's a good one. And especially for assuming maybe they want to do an IDO and then they probably want to launch some liquidity mining campaign, right? And so if that pool that they wanted people to provide to was on DXswap, and then they could adjust the fees themselves and actually govern the pool, I think it's, just a really great product.
Yeah, and Bodan, I'd recommend checking out that DAO Talk thread that I linked to above. That was kind of the original post that we had on forking Uniswap. It has some more detail in terms of what advantages or what differentiates DXswap. But the basics of it are governance. Like we're adding governance of the fees. Uniswap has a fixed fee. DXswap is going to have a changeable fee, and that's managed by governance.
Oh yeah, Augusto. I don't know. I didn't see if you answered me, but can you make the fee anything you want, or is it just between 0 and 0.3%? On
Between
Yeah.
0 and 0.3%. That's the range of values.
I
For
mean,
now-
in theory, we could adapt the code to have a larger range. In theory, or we could, right?
Yeah, actually, we can't, because that will mean deploying another factory contract and everything. I mean, yeah, we may
It's
be able to.
deployed on
Yeah.
Coven, right? So I mean, it's not mainnet yet, right? So
Yeah, it's not on mainnet yet.
But because John had mentioned the benefit of having like a really high fee in some cases, like 5% or something, and even had to have that option in there would be nice to have from the start. Even if we don't use it, right?
Yeah. Do we want to have that option? We are using the range of fees in order to be always competitive with Uniswap in the code level. But if we want, we can change and remove that limit and increase it to.
Because we want to be competitive with Uniswap on the trader side, but also on the liquidity provider side. And the higher fee, especially in times of volatility, and like assets that are volatile, can help like prevent against impermanent loss. So I know that actually I think this is probably like one of the weakest things Uniswap has going for it from a liquidity provider perspective is just the exposure. The fees don't justify like the impermanent loss.
Yeah. Okay.
there's
Okay,
potentially
so-
like other use cases as well that are not just ERC20. Like I mean, you saw. I mean, maybe it's not ever going to be a big thing, but there were like artists selling rare goods on Uniswap via an ERC20, and you can imagine in certain cases they may just want a high fee for certain use cases.
Yeah, as long as you don't think there's a risk, like let's say you make the max, so it could be 0. I mean, maybe you can even go negative. That'd be cool. But let's say 0 to 10% max, just so unless you could have 100% max. But if there's a risk to that, that also has to be taken into account.
I feel like DXswap wants to have like very, very low fees and maybe very, very high fees, right? Because you're like, people are interested in different ways. So yeah, I mean, that flexibility is just something that hopefully we can like sell to projects and people. And so just all of the little, things that they could do to customize it would be cool. I know it's just more work though.
Yeah, we can revisit this tomorrow on the call. Kind of what is the desired range from a product standpoint? Yeah, like because right now, yeah,
you're going to see that play out on Omen as well, where you now have the option to set your fee percentage, and you're going to see lots of different use cases because 2% fee on Omen doesn't seem right, and so I think there's people creating ones with higher fees. Yeah.
Okay.
cool.
Yeah, let's discuss it tomorrow.
That sounds good. And just to make a quick update on Rails.eth, Federico has a worker proposal that is boosted and live and has some votes for. So, hopefully he'll be working on that soon, and we'll have Rails.eth live before too long. I'm guessing, like maybe 1 month or so. Shall we move now just to recap the calls, and then we can spend the rest of the time maybe discussing onboarding and potentially voting if people want to talk a little bit about this pausing the curve proposal. But yeah, Ingemar, do you want to just recap the biz dev?
Yeah. Give me 1 second. I'm gonna pull up the thread. All right, so what do we talk about? Cheryl from Deeper Network. It's like a hardware-based VPN network. She had a couple of her team members show up with the CTO, the CEO. They gave some background on the project. They're based in Santa Clara. Apparently Loopring is an investor in that project, which is interesting. And I contacted Matt to confirm that. I haven't heard from him yet. And they're incubated by Republic. So that's a very well-known, I guess, accelerator or investment company, whatever you want to call it. Very big name with reputable people. So I think they do have some credibility, even though their business model is like kind of hard to understand, and their website is like, but it does seem like an honest project with real people, and something that I would lean towards, being down with like a Mesa IDO. Might need to do a little more research. We also had Plotus. They're an AMM prediction market platform, specifically focused towards like crypto trading and prices. So like what price will Bitcoin be by blah, blah, blah. Mainly just for that and speculators. So they need an arbitrator. They also need like a community to govern their platform. And the representative threw out the idea of allotting some governing power in the form of tokens to the DXdao, which I think would be really cool. I guess it would be a substantial amount to have some say, some plurality in the governance to start, at least. As he admires how well we've done and how well we govern Omen, and he doesn't really see Omen as like a real competitor, because like prediction markets can cover all types of subjects. They really focus like on one specific thing, whereas Omen, I don't think we have like a specialty market. So we may not really compete in that respect. So I think a collaboration between the DXdao and Plotus would be really cool, and I think would net a lot of tokens. So we had an extensive talk on DXD holders having voting power. There was pretty much some consensus on either placing restrictions on the DX trust on how much DXD to mint, or just ending it entirely. So there was like varying opinions on that. There's currently a proposal on Alchemy regarding that, and it just got unboosted last minute, which is interesting. And we discussed Pete Smeet's worker proposal for some length, as he's a pretty recent member showing up on these calls and the forums. So that was about it for the BD call.
Thanks, Ingemar. And yeah, that halting the bonding curve proposal had gotten downstaked and knocked out of the pending stage right before the call, but it's actually been upstaked again and back into the pending stage during the call. So that'll be interesting to watch. Augusto, do you want to take us to the dev call?
Yeah. Well, actually, notes we were talking about the Mesa and Omen new releases. DXswap, I think it was before. No, yeah, it was before I published DXswap on Koban. Then something that we were talking about that we haven't discussed yet is different strategies for refunds of gas prices of gas that was spent voting, staking, and creating proposals. We are working with Nico on a script and a smart contract that we are going to use, that we are going to propose to be used to refund gas that was spent in voting, staking, and creating proposals in a period of time. But then we are going to be able to test and implement on-chain gas refund on new voting machine implementations that we are going to be testing on Cova. So yeah, that is what we were talking about.
Thanks, Augusto. Yes, yeah, we'll have to make a DAO Talk post to kind of explain what this could enable with the gas reimbursement. Basically, the problem being that with really high gas costs, it's a huge disincentive for people to participate in voting governance, and obviously governance is pretty key to DXdao. So the devs are basically presenting an option here where the DAO could actually reimburse, a percentage or maybe the whole gas cost for voters. Okay, with that, Chris, do you want to talk about the governance call?
Sure. I wrote long notes so you can read them. So I'll just briefly go over them here. DXD voting rights, kind of a topic of the last couple of weeks, and the two kind of more concrete ideas floating around now are the ERC20 Guild, which would basically have voting for DXD holders, and then they would, as a chunk, be able to have a say in the regular rep, or secondly, DXD lock for rep. Further discussion on the curve, as what Ingemar said, and then, picking up discussion from the last couple of weeks on the Treasury, and we'll kind of move that forward with a more a holistic plan that has some diversification, and it also includes maybe some allocation for like a liquidity mining campaign or for any of the DXdao products. Manifesto is moving pretty forward, is almost done. It's open for, I'll paste the link in here, open for comments. I'm going to post this onto the thread that I think Sky started so that it's more in the forums as an official one. And then talking about where that gets posted. Obviously, I think it's going to be a proposal. It would be great to have something linked on the main website. I also think it might be an opportunity for the DXdao itself to try to figure out one of those decentralized blogging service, so that there'd be something that was like the medium for the DXdao. And then, the governance as a service. We talked a little bit about the reimbursing voters for high gas cost, and then looking for DX ambassadors, or people that can, I think specifically for DMG, trying to figure out how to be a more active governance participant there, and communicating what's going on in DMG governance to the DXdao community. And then lastly, interesting, important discussion on proposal auditing and code auditing from John. Obviously, like this morning, it probably is a great example where, if a proposal just kind of slipped through and no one was watching, there's some security risk for the DAO, and then also about how to maybe form a relationship with an auditor, given the different products and needs, both in DeFi and governance, that DXdao has.
And on the topic of the proposal monitoring, and you can look at my post on DAO Talk for the details, but there are 3 different solutions in place to kind of act as redundant, as tools to make sure that people are able to see proposals and what's coming through outside of just the Alchemy UI, so that we're not entirely reliant on the Alchemy UI. Okay, great. With that, I know Augusto had mentioned onboarding earlier, so I think it would be great if we could talk about that, and maybe we can also talk a little bit about the bonding curve proposal. We can maybe split the remaining time between those two. On onboarding, I'd like to just kind of preface the topic with just saying that myself and a few others here, Ingemar, Chris, and other devs and stuff, have been working together on kind of compiling a list. I mean, you could think it's analogous to job openings, basically, like what are the needs of the DXdao in terms of the products, right? So Omen, Mesa, DXSwap, the actual governance tools, like what kind of help is needed there. It's something that's been on our minds for a long time, but the treasury has increased, ETH has increased in value, and therefore, there's almost like a new mandate, or relatively like a greater mandate to kind of ramp up some of these efforts. So I'll be passing that around more widely, and hopefully that can also help to facilitate onboarding and like kind of, lay the groundwork for how people can get involved. And because I know Pete is on the call, and you had a proposal in DAO Talk about a potential worker engagement. And, I just want to say that, like, I appreciate you taking the initiative there. I realize it's probably kind of daunting at this point in time with the lack of process and the lack of structure around the whole thing. So, I mean, with that, maybe we can just open up and talk a little bit about what we could do for onboarding.
Yeah, hey guys, it's me, Pete. Maybe let me just chip in here, because obviously I'm the one who's at the center of this discussion. So I've been involved in different decentralized organizations and projects since 2018. And typically what happens is projects have a blog post, right? They have a blog on Medium or something. So anyone who's got an interest can read up on this. And for instance, you can specify anybody who's supposed to join or who wants to join DXdao needs to disclose his identity. That's also how many other projects are doing it. For instance, Melon, they have a technical and a business council, and they say, look, if you want to be part of the kind of advisory or management council, you need to disclose your identity. And I think that's absolutely fine. Now, I had pieced together information about DXdao through the worker guidelines and through the forum posts. Up until today, actually, I don't even know who's really you guys, right? Like, there's no team page, there's no page of the collective with at least a thumbnail picture, what everybody is doing. I figured out Ingemar is doing something with Omen, then Chris and John are pretty much doing various things. So that's like super, super difficult. But at the same time conveys the impression that there is no requirement to disclose personal information, right? So take that as an observation. Just take that in. Don't add me, just take it in, kind of meditate on it, and just change that. I also kind of want to shortcut the whole discussion about my proposal a little bit. I want to say I'm going to take a step back. I've got different priorities, so I need to make a decision. I think you guys, as DXdao, you've got so many other things on the plate you need to prioritize, especially now that with Andrew Kang, you have an activist investor, well, in the token holder structure, I wouldn't call it capital structure, who's probably going to focus your attention more on the DXD rep normalization kind of thing, right? Which is absolutely fine. I support that. DXD rep was one of my major criticisms the first time I posted something about the DXdao. And then, yeah, so look, when I first looked at the DXdao, one of the things I really, really liked about this in comparison to other projects is this idea of being a collective. And which, by the way, in your manifesto, you are stating you should be open, blah, blah, blah. And I always thought that these conversations, these telephone calls are pretty collaborative. They're pretty good. And then I'm posting something, I'm reading something, and they sound rather negative. And it's like, oh, you're never going to make it, and this and this and this. Whereas if somebody disagrees with my contribution so far, right? And you can also like make it clear, if you expect the potential candidate of the DXD to apply themselves, then make it clear they need to contribute something. I'm not a developer, by the way, Augusto. I don't contribute to GitHub repos. I look at business stuff, which, by the way, all of us had discussed over the last couple of calls, so that was absolutely clear. If you guys think that somebody's contribution are not helpful, then verbalize that. But don't just say, oh, I've looked at the DAO talk and, I only see 20 entries, by the way, for which I was never paid. That was all like my goodwill to show it to you guys, like where I would fit in. So I'm kind of thinking what I've read, what I thought about the DXdao as a collective, like being open, You guys need to learn a lot, so that's why I'm not kind of saying this in any negative sense, right? I'm just kind of outline this so you guys can take it in, implement changes quickly because these are easy changes. But yeah, like for instance, the worker guidelines, make these more prominent, put them on the website, make clear that if somebody seeks a permanent employment with the DXD, they need to disclose the identity. Maybe there's going to be 2 people from the DXdao who interview them, right? I met this one dude from DXcred in 2018. He tells me he flies around the world to interview eye to eye potential new members to make sure that DXcred isn't infiltrated by any kind of, malicious interest groups. So kind of put structure on that, because at the end of the day, DXD is about the people, right? It's about you guys. So just to kind of wrap this up, I'm going to take a step back. I'm going to be much more passive. We'll dial in calls on a sporadic basis. We'll follow the conversations. But yeah, I think first and foremost, you need to kind of focus on these processes, the kind of HR, the kind of people element, as well as making sure the kind of restructuring of DXD and rep is happening.
Yeah, hola Pete, thanks. Yeah, you are right. I think I agree with you on a lot of stuff that the onboarding process is not defined, right? This is all things that we are figuring out on the way. The only thing we came up that is still on the work is the worker guidelines, and yeah, now we have this new discussion about how, I mean, if it's needed for someone to disclose his identity or to know them personally, or to be known personally by the rest of the workers, depends on the position that he's going to be working on. Is it a real need or not? So I think these are very important things that we should discuss. That is why I brought them up here on the call. And yeah. So it would be great if we can discuss these guys. I'm curious to see what other people think. And yeah, then I meant everything that we talked on the post. I don't think that 20 replies on the auto post is enough for someone to join a full-time engagement in the community. Well, I'm curious also to think what other people think here.
Okay. But look, this is the thing. Like, it's not about me posting 20 replies or something. I have provided a 3-page discussion material deck on how I see, for instance, Omen could be positioned from a target group and how that would translate into liquidity mining. I've put up a whole review of the workers' guidelines. Like, this is what I actually really dislike about your particular reply, Augusto, and I make this very personal. You kind of just look at this one thing, and then you said, oh, it's shit. Instead of saying, and that's why I asked, do you disagree or agree? Do you think my feedback adds value or not? You still have not answered it because you haven't looked at it. That's what I mean. Like, if you don't have anything to say, don't say it. If you think, or if you have something negative about what I produced, then just say it as a matter of fact that you disagree with something. Then we have a discussion basis, but don't say, oh, 20 is too little, given that I'm not being paid by anyone. This was all based on goodwill, So I don't get this. This is like ridiculous. This is like outright impolite. And this is not time with the manifesto, like we're open towards new people who have an interest kind of stuff, Period.
Yeah, I've been thinking about this. I've been thinking about this word absorb a lot, and I think that's kind of what the DXdao needs to think about, how it approaches like onboarding, because part of the reason is, the DXdao is like not this solid established, thing right now. It's mushy. You can kind of move around, and we need to be able to like take in, new people and new ideas and be able to do that. But the problem also is this collective right now is since it's this like mush of all these different things, it doesn't actually, it's not very responsive to those new things. So, I mean, to yeah, so I think it's kind of figuring out how we absorb these new ideas, because also, if the DXdao wants to scale, it's going to have to figure out how to bring on more and more people. But there is something about the governance of DXdao and the community of DXdao that almost like purposefully moves slow. And I think that ability kind of gives, it's the ability to reach consensus, because consensus just takes time. Right? It's not so much about coming up with like the good ideas and laying them out there. It's like, how do we communicate and get those ideas throughout the collective? And I think that's what we really kind of need to scale. But I think that's what you're kind of pointing out is basically, it's just hard to like get that, because it's basically, we basically have to convince everyone. Right. And that's not very good right now.
Well,
and like, it's not realistic for someone to, prove themselves to everyone individually, but like the way that it's set up now, it's hard for us to kind of take in new people without it being that. So I think this is just, I know it's kind of, we've had a lot of growing pains, and where it's like, this is part of the process, at least. I mean, I hope kind of, we'd love to have you kind of more involved going forward, regardless of the level, but just, I feel like regardless of what happens to this, we're figuring something out now in this process now, because it's clearly not, exactly as you said, not living up to the kind of ideals and goals that we're trying to abide by.
Absolutely. And I know that I was the one who kind of came up, like I took the initiative, and I've kind of triggered this experimental phase, and that's absolutely fine. And it's also for me a new experience to see how you guys do it. But just because you mentioned it, the thing mush, look, I put myself forward to help you guys sort this out.
Yeah, but you can't though. Like, that's the thing, it's mush. Like, it's not like this is just like, oh, we got to put this structure on it. Like, it's like rolls at a certain period, and we can't like, it's like you can't speed up some of these things. And so it's kind of like, how do we roll with the same like process and slow? And that's kind of, absorbing into the DXdao fold and kind of figuring out what makes the DXdao ticks. And basically like, it's like, how do you convince everyone? Right. And that's like much different than how do you come up with like the best ideas that everyone can abide by.
Yeah, so I get that, because I think some of the previous workup proposals, they were specific for, let's say, a full stack developer or UI developer for Omen or for Mesa, right? So it's very specific, and then there's maybe the existing workers who are on that, and it's like 2 or 3, and they form a consensus, and they say, this guy did a great job, it's really helping us, fantastic, right? I kind of come in with a business background, finance background, I position myself much more on a higher level. But the thing I'm trying also to point out now is that of course, processes are not as established as we wish they would be. But instead of kind of saying, Pete, you have to disclose your identity, otherwise we will not kind of want to do anything with you at all, you should have said, look, what you suggested previously is a little bit too much right now. But hey, we need this thing for this onboarding process. We give you, let's say, I'm making up a number, $1,000 worth of Ethereum to do this over the next couple of days and weeks, right? I mean, you've got $4 million in your treasury worth of Ethereum, probably more. You have DXD, and that's the conversation we had on Monday. Like, I'm kind of looking at this, and I'm kind of also thinking, you have to figure out, like, what do you want to do with the financial means that you have in order to execute on that vision, right?
To stick up for the DXdao a little bit, and I very much appreciate it, but Augusto doesn't speak for the DXdao, right? Like, so I think in terms of like how this is trying to kind of, there's not like some collective that can kind of like come up with a solution and be like, Pete, you should do this. And so like, I even like, that it's kind of like, there isn't even like a default option. But I think on the, and I know we can maybe, would like to hear someone else jump in because I'm talking too much. But I think the anonymous thing is something we just, again, haven't really, I think that people have talked about it, but clearly have not like come to any consensus. And so then if you like kind of approach the group and there's no consensus, if you talk to one person, like they're going to say something and they're going to have an opinion, but you talk to someone else and like they're going to have a different opinion. So like for those, it's like, it's almost like we just can't get consensus on that. But absolutely, we need to like figure out what are the, stipulations for that, or what do we kind of think about that?
Yeah, and like, just to kind of close this from my point, and then I'm going to drop off, is that's coming down to the token structure, because I can't rally Twitter behind me. I can't just post like DXD, please guys support me, and everybody supports, right? Like that's one of the problems. Like there's whatever, like 5 people who have the majority of rep. So that then comes back to me being like helpless, because to me as an external person, you guys as the group and on DAO Talk, you are the DXdao in my perception. And I would assume, as somebody who's not part of the collective, that if Augusto says, no, Pete, then he talks to you, Chris, he talks to you, John, he talks to you, Sky, and then you guys are like, yeah, he's the new kid on the block, I'm not too sure, right? Like, make it welcoming if you want to have new people.
Yeah, and I think it's pretty clear that there's some easy things, not necessarily, I mean, you're going to take a little bit of work to do, but some very clear things that can be done to just make the process more mature. There's some very kind of obvious stuff missing, and that's kind of like on us. And I mean, but I think to Chris's point too, is it is a little bit different, like you mentioned Melon Protocol or some of these other projects before, which are like DAOs in at least in some respect, but like, I think it's a little bit different because DXdao it's not like a council that like sits down and like came out of a company or something. It really is like this emergent consensus, kind of, that's how things get done. And like none of us really actually do have the individual ability to, you know, get a vote to pass or whatever. It has to be through consensus. And then I think the other thing too is that we need to just make this more clear, I think, to newcomers, is like, how do you demonstrate your skills, right? Like, it's hard, you know, I mean, personally, I think we should respect people who don't want to like fully disclose identity. And to me, like, I think what makes the most sense there is to have some clear like trial period, some like, you know, like you can, without even having to really like, you know, show a resume, you could demonstrate your abilities by doing some work, right, for the DXdao. And essentially everybody working for the DXdao is a contractor, because that's how it works. You have to make a proposal for a certain amount of time with the budget. But yeah, anyways. Anybody else want to add on to that before I guess we're a little over the hour, and I just wanted to, if people wanted to talk more about the pausing the curve, we'd be happy to stick on the call and kind of discuss that some more. If anybody wants to talk about just, you know, if there's questions about the mechanics of how it would work, how the voting would work, happy to talk more about that. And I've also, it's currently just getting some peer review, and I need to respond to comments, but I do plan to publish like a somewhat detailed post about DXD, the bonding curve, how it works, you know, what some of the potential like future, yeah, and some of the potential future, you know, directions that DXD can go, governance, et cetera. So, I mean, I'll post that in Keybase, yeah.
I brought up I wanted to say one more thing. That's partly why I want to push for like a bounty billboard as like a place where someone can like see like what the DAO needs and like be like, hey, can I take this? Oh, okay, yeah, sure, and you'll get this. So there's like a clear, valuable project that you don't have to come up with yourself. Like the DAO already kind of greenlighted it for anyone to take on. And then once that, you know, like there'll be someone still in charge. Like for example, like if someone wanted to come to me and say, hey, I want to write an article about Rails, like, cool, like I'll work with you on that. And like, just know you're getting this, and then they deliver, and you know, they do the proposal, and they get like a little rep. And like, that could be like their first like contribution. And then like, because it's valuable and we needed it, like the DAO will know that, oh yeah, that's the guy who contributed this. And you know, this piece of content or this whatever that is valuable and we still use. So I feel like it's tough for anyone to just come up with something that is beneficial to the DAO and then like on top of that figure out what it's worth, and then get a whole pseudonymous DAO to say cool. And also Delphi Digital liked the idea of like a place to go of like, this is what the DAO needs to get done, and anybody can help.
Agreed. And that's on all of us to kind of like push this process forward. All right. So, I mean, we could wrap right now. Did people want to talk more about, did anybody have questions on this curve thing or the way DAO stack works?
I like DAO stack. I would think the voting. So now I don't know if it's now pending or unpending, but
yeah, like finally people are going to ask the hard questions, like what the heck is going on?
So I guess it's like basically people are technically like predicting or like not predicting. Like the boost is basically them betting on that, right?
I've heard it called it's not technically a prediction market, but it's like a prediction market, and people are basically staking or down staking. It's a pari-mutuel bet. Whichever side wins, the like people on that side, the stake on that side wins the stake from the other side. So like right now it's like 4,580 gen on the up stake, 2,250 on the down. If it actually gets boosted and then say it wins, and then the group of people with the 4,500 up stake, they would get paid out proportionally the 2,200 down stake. Where it differs from a prediction market is it doesn't matter where you enter. It's just a pari-mutuel bet. Like it's just paid out to the other side. It doesn't matter if you came in at the last minute or at the beginning. Whereas in a prediction market, the price is moving, right? And it matters. Like you're paying a different price along the way. So it's a pari-mutuel bet.
If you stake if you staked 3,000 to boost it, to up staked, and then someone staked 3,500 to like down boost it, do you get your 3,000 back if you choose not to like?
Once you stake, that stake is locked in. Now, the only time it will actually get paid out is if the proposal resolves to yes or no. And there's two, and the other option that could happen is it could just expire, which is what would happen if it fails to boost and then it's actually a decent amount of time till it expires, like Ingemar is saying here in the chat, right? Like if it fails to boost, it'll just end up expiring, and then eventually you get your gen back. Yeah.
I don't think there's enough support behind this proposal, so even if it does boost, I think there are still some people like keeping an eye on it and like ready to downvote it. So like I think that's what's going to happen, in which case I would like for people who are in strong opposition to just like say why or voice why, what their concern is. So we have a dialogue about it instead of just like, like a long conversation about like why this thing should happen by a lot of different people. And like it fails, even though like no one like came out and said like why it should fail.
Well, I guess was there a long discussion? I mean, I feel like stopping it is a proactive move. And I know there was like some discussion in the forum last week and on both the calls this week, but I feel like I feel like the burden of proof relies on the people making the proposal.
Yeah, it's not even clear what halting the bonding curve means, as Augustus mentioning, like how do you do it? What exactly does that mean? And even if you pause or halt it, if then the DAO can restart it, what does pausing or halting it for like, let's say 6 months, what does that even do?
It's like giving somebody ice cream though. Good luck getting it back, Possibly.
I do think it's also like this would only be a signal proposal. Right, it would just be like the DXdao is saying we're going to stop it, but it's like if it passed, that wouldn't like stop the curve or do anything. There would have to presumably be like an actual executable code that would pass.
Sorry, Sky.
If this actually passes, the only thing it does is it sends someone 1,000 gen.
Right, that's the only thing that happens on chain. But I mean, it would make clear that the DAO wants to. I mean, that's basically a mandate for the devs to make sure that this is that it will happen, right? That and then so I was saying this earlier in the chat, but so this does not enact the pause, right? For the pause to actually happen, The exact mechanics of how that can happen is there's a parameter called the minimum investment amount for the curve. And so the DXdao actually can change this parameter. And if it changes it to be really high, that effectively prevents any buys from happening on the curve. The curve would still be there. You could still sell into it. We still send the revenue through it. So everything would work. It just wouldn't mint new DXD when people buy on it.
Could the change of that parameter have been put in this proposal, or is that extra work?
It's extra work because even though the DXdao owns the bonding curve, the plugin to interact with it has actually not been built yet. So the first step is to build the plugin, like the scheme, the DAO-like scheme, that interacts with the bonding curve, which we should be doing anyways. And it's not like a super hard thing to do, but that needs to be done. And then once that scheme is in place, it would be another proposal in that scheme, in that plugin, saying, set the min investment amount to, 500 million or whatever is like, sufficiently high enough that we know that nobody can buy with Ether.
This is crazy because the way that we design, not the way that we design because it was defined by Fermi, but the way the contracts are designed is to, so every time that you buy to the cure, you're going to generate more DXD, which is going to decrease the value because you're going to have more DXD active. Actually, no project has, I don't know if any project have something like this where Fermi, but it kind of controls the growing of the price, and so it doesn't go too high, too quick, but also controlling the amount of DXD that is in existence. And by halting it, we won't be generating any more DXD, which will kind of increase the value, but we will stop receiving money. The organization who supports DXD will stop receiving more Ether that later can be used, that we are going to need. I think we are going to need a lot of Ether, a lot of funds to provide liquidity for DXswap. So there is we can find needs for all this money that we are going to raise. I think it's just we haven't found it yet because this is just a few months old. So we have to consider that. If we had the cure, we will stop receiving Ether, and then there is going to come a time where we are going to start it again, and it's going to start at a very low price, maybe compared to the one that is being traded on exchanges. Imagine that we start the cube again at 60 cents per Ether, and it's being traded at 80 cents. So how that will impact our token economy? It's going to be a huge impact later this week if we want to restart it again. So the idea, this was done in a way where if you don't stop the cure, you just sell tokens back. That is what they should be proposing, I think, like saying, okay, let's sell back some of our DXD, or we burn it. Okay, how much token we generated these past months? Okay, let's burn half of them, something like that, to also increase the Ether reserve in the DXD trust, because all the Ether that we have, most of it is in our organization treasury. Should we move some of it to our DX trust? I think that would be no halting the cure by trying to find a solution of, okay, how can we decrease the DXD supply in order to make the price a bit more competitive and increase our Ether reserve in the DX trust.
Yeah, the only thing I would add is I think this is it's clear that this is would be a very big move and require a lot of technical work, a lot of consensus reaching. And so I guess I find this interesting as like a way for how would that process start, right? And so how would the DXdao start to signal that? And presumably if this proposal passed, that would be a very bullish that would probably lead to a run up in DXD price. So like thinking about how the DXdao like gives what they call in the central bank world forward guidance on like things that it's considering, things that it's trying to work on. I think this is a good example of that, because it would be such a kind of big shift to the way a lot of things are structured.
Yeah, Ingemar mentioned like thinking it's not going to pass. I mean, it's not clear to me how people are going to vote on this. Somebody downstaked it. It's not clear why. Nobody voiced why they did that. I mean, it could be, it could be that they're against it and they don't want it to be boosted. But it could also be that they just thought it was too fast. And I mean, who knows, right? Like why whoever downstaked it, I don't know. But I do think, like, yeah, to Ingemar's point, like dialogue is important about this, and we have been talking about it, but it would be a very big move, and like we can have, that's part of why I'm going to like publish this longer post, is try to anchor some of these discussions in like one post with some of just like, not really taking a stance, but just kind of laying out how it works and what's there and some of the ideas that have been talked about.
Another thing, like we could start it back up, just the same process as stopping it, from as far as I know. Only thing is, if we were started back up, like it resumes from the price that we stopped it. So like in a year, like a few months, we resume it, like it'll be at a discount from like the market price. I don't know if there's a way to change that. Probably isn't, but it's something to think about.
Say that again, Ingemar, sorry.
Like if we pause the DX Trust at whatever 0.7 Ether to mint, and then a few months go by and the market price for DXD is 0.9 Ether, if we resume the curve price, it resumes at 0.7, right? Ether? If
you simply change that parameter without like completely update, yes, yeah, it would just open.
Yeah.
And that would be bad for the market price, obviously, right? Because then if it's selling on the market at 2 ETH and the curve is at 0.7 and it will mint, people will just arbitrage, dump on the market, arb, and then the market price is going to come down and the curve price will come up, and it'll meet somewhere in the middle, right?
That's also what the DXD group I'm in is complaining about now, because actually the market price does surpass the curve price, and people do arb between the curve and the market price. So that's kind of their complaint about it.
What is their complaint? That there is arb?
Yeah, there
is.
That it's happening already.
So just summarizing what you guys just discussed right there, halting or pausing the curve basically does not make any sense. It does. No one knows what it means, and it's not going to lead to anything good. The only thing you can actually do is like destroy the curve. You have to actually destroy burn the entire thing, and then say, this is the amount of total DXD ever. That's the only way you can do it. So if you're gonna make if that's what we want to do, that's what we should be discussing. But you can't pause it. It doesn't make any sense.
Well, but there would.
Augusto, you got tape here, Augusto. You can't just type this in.
I know. So it was like hearing Sky say this, and while Augusto is just. But I agree with that completely. That's what I was thinking about. This is such a big shift. Having said that, because of the pre-mint, I do think that DXdao is in position to potentially switch to have a huge switch in how that would be, and as you said, like destroy the curve. But it's not like just something like can happen very quickly, because there's so much of the ecosystem, right? That's kind of in that. So
yeah,
maybe
in my view, I wouldn't view it that extremely, but I do believe that if you pause the buying on the curve, like I said before, everything else still works. But if you pause it, I think it's going to become intractable to unpause it, because of what we just described, right? Like
that was what I was kind of getting
at. The market is not going to be happy if you just all of a sudden like dump on it, right? Basically, and I mean, it's not like the Dow dumping directly in the market. It's just like opening up the inflation supply, right? And just being like, it's like we're gonna go Argentina on the DXD. It's like.
Is there a way to pause it forever with no way to unpause it?
No.
To
Not
basically
with-
destroy it, to burn it, and say this is the most amount of DXD ever.
The DAO has the ability to upgrade the curve, but that would involve just like, so in terms of what I talked about earlier is like pausing it. That's the existing curve has this parameter which you can submit an update to, like the DAO can update, right? That's it though. It's like you can set that parameter. You can also unset. You can set it down again, right? So in theory, the DAO could like unpause the curve. Yeah. Turn the minting back on.
Remember when you said that like we're not certain that like it's going to be voted against, or I don't know, somebody already voted against it.
Ingemar, were you waiting with your finger on the?
Yeah, I have a sixth sense, man.
Yeah.
So John, though, once you pause it, can the DAO actually do an action that like burns the ability to unpause it?
No.
Other than that, changing that parameter.
Not without completely upgrading the contracts. The DAO can basically do anything, but the upgradable, but that would involve like a whole new deployment. And like it gets really complicated and technical. What's like relatively easy is to modify the adjustable parameters that already exist in the curve. And what I'm saying is, yeah, that min investment can effectively pause the curve.
Well, there could be other ways of fundraising, I guess, with like the rep. Yeah. Right?
I would the only thing I would say is I do think there is a decentralization benefit to a wide distribution of DXD tokens.
One of the things personally, I don't see a huge problem with pausing the curve. I'm more worried about what the consequences of pausing it immediately would be on the community. And what I imagine will happen is DXD will surge in the price. It will draw a lot of attention to the DAO, and we'll have a rush of people in. Maybe some people coming for even the wrong reasons, just the price appreciate, but so I kind of worry a little bit about, is DXdao ready for that? And like we were just talking about with the onboarding process, it's not as mature in my eyes as it should be. So I kind of worry about that kind of stuff. Like, are we ready for an influx that is something the DAO has control over, right? Like, if the DAO is going to do this, like, it should be ready for the consequences of it.
Something that also we can do. I don't know if it is. It is possible. I don't know if it meant to be done in this decentralized autonomous trust design. We can buy tokens on the organization. So that will mean, yeah, Chris is laughing. That will mean, if we use the funds, we can transfer the funds to an address, buy the tokens, and increase a lot the price. So the buying price will be double of what it is now. Tokens will be generated. They will be under control of the DXdao. That is another solution. I think that I think no.
Do you mean on the curve? On the curve, Augusto, we could double the price, or on the open market?
On the curve.
Because on the curve, it's impossible for the DXdao to double the price, right? Because the amount of ETH raised by the DXdao, or the amount of ETH into the curve, 90% of which goes to the treasury, is the integral under the curve, right? So it's like the area under the line. If you double the price, that area is much bigger than the existing area. In fact, it's the total area is 4 times as big. So
I don't know if double, but we can increase a lot.
Yeah, we can increase it, but it's a Sisyphean task by design, right? It's like to double the price of the curve, it actually requires 4 times, 3 times the existing capital has to additionally go in. The total capital in has to be 4 times the existing.
What would
Okay,
happen?
Even though we get the ETH back?
Yeah, well, I mean, we will get the ETH back, and 10% of it will be, Ether, it will be like a cash flow.
Oh yeah, in that
90%
case,
will go
I
to
guess
the
it can keep going up, right? Because we're keep recycling the ETH.
Yeah,
But minus the 10% training. So it's like leveraging up your maker.
yeah, but
I mean, this
the
is
thing
literally what EOS did, right?
Only this would be
It
completely
raised,
public
the
and not.
ICO did. But it's like, what happens to the buyback reserve if the curve, I don't know, was paused or destroyed?
Well, that's what I was trying to
whatever
explain. Is like this is one parameter, the minimum buy parameter. That basically by setting it high, a side effect is that nobody would be able to buy, right? Otherwise, the curve, you're not stopping the curve. Otherwise, you're not like.
But like, I'm just talking about I mean, there's like $500,000 worth of Ether in there.
It would stay there.
Forever.
Well, it supports the sell price of the DXD. So if somebody,
I'm saying if we pause, so that people would still be able to sell into.
Right. The
curve.
parameter that would be adjusted is the minimum investment, the minimum buy amount.
Okay.
It does
Yeah,
not impact
this is-
the sell. Yeah.
This was designed in a way that you don't stop the curve. You just send enough revenue back in order to keep to have a competitive sell price. So the problem is that now on very early stages, the price and the buy and sell price are completely different. They are very distant from each other. So what we should do if the main concern about DXD holders that are pushing out this initiative is the increasing of DXD supply, right? So I think that a counter proposal for the community will be, okay, let's not do this. Let's instead burn DXD. I think we should try to find a way, like a place in between with DXD holders and organization owners, because actually our interests are very much aligned. That is, I think they don't understand how maybe they don't understand completely how the decentralized autonomous trust works.
I think the immediate motivation, what I suspect the immediate motivation is just to see some quick price appreciation.
Yeah,
in
exactly.
DXD.
Yeah.
Now, that's maybe not the right reason to do it. I mean, but I think another way to ask it is like how much ETH does the DXdao want to raise?
A lot. I mean, everything that we can. We want to have as many. I mean, who will say no to money? We want to have as many funds as we can. Then we see where we can use it.
But
the more that we have, the more liquidity we are going to be able to have. For example, in DXdao,
you could argue that the DXdao could get more value by stopping the curve right now, and DXD 10x's, and because of our pre-mint, we have way more money than we could ever raise in ETH.
Yeah, I mean, it's arguably better for the treasury to stop the curve.
And you might have way more money than you could ever raise in ETH.
Yeah, but DXD is not as liquid. So if you would try to sell your DXD trader, you will end up crashing the price and having nothing. While if you have ETH, you basically have cash.
Yeah, or Ether. Yeah.
We don't like
where
that.
we are now. We are doing both. The DXD price is increasing in a more natural way because it's being stopped by the cure. Yeah, but this is what it does. It kind of controls how do you call it? The external market from the cure.
Another suggestion was to, and I just explained that this is technically much harder to do, but a suggestion was to replace the existing curve with an exponential curve. Somewhere in DAO talk.
Oh yeah. That's another thing. The graph that you are seeing on DXdao is the price buy graph, and then you have the sell price. And now what we want to do, that I think it will be super interesting to show the bonding curve, where it will still be pretty much like a straight line, but you can.
Yeah, I didn't follow what you mean by that. What do you mean show the bonding curve? Like we already are showing the. Are you talking about showing not price versus supply, but something else?
The historical bonding curve, because the bonding
like the
curve
historical.
Yeah.
What the price versus what would the axes be?
Yeah, with all the historic data, you can represent the bonding curve over time on the project.
What data would you want to display? Are you talking about displaying the price or the market cap?
The buy and sells. No, the buy and sell that happen on the curve. If you get all that, you can actually represent with the price between the buy and sell price, the median price. You can. That is the curve that you're going to see, the bonding curve. Or how and you will see how this curve is attached to the market, to the outside markets of the curve.
It would still be a straight line, though, right? Like it would just be the price.
Yeah, now it will be a straight line because everyone was buying. So, I mean, you will still see a straight line. Like it doesn't matter how do you want to show it, it will still be a straight line.
Because so I think, what people are suggesting is like instead of having a linear relationship between price and supply, having an exponential relationship between price and supply, so that as basically it'll mint more, but only when the price goes up even more, and then it's just a more favorable relationship for people who are holding the token, and basically less supply increase per price increase, and then ever less and less.
Well, that will happen because the sell price is going to also go higher,
Right, that's what I mean by exponential, right? Like, so right now it's like a straight line up into the right, like up into the right is an exponential, like it gets steeper and steeper. Meaning,
but you're forgetting ETH's exponential price increase, right?
Yeah,
because it's a linear. I mean, that's what's interesting is it's based on ETH, right? So like the amount fundraised in dollar terms.
If your view is that ETH is going up, that actually makes it even. They were already on an exponential curve, right? Like
that. Yeah, I think we're somewhere in between. It's kind of my argument.
Yeah.
And it will make also when you send funds into the curve, it will make it much harder to the exponential thing will cause us to send much more funds into the curve to actually make any change.
To support the minting burn,
both ways. It urges the price appreciation, but then it's much harder to.
We need to have an exponential increase in revenue in order to have a reasonable sell price.
Yeah. That thing, we need to send revenue back to the curve. That is what we have to do. That is what is meant to happen for this to have an exponential bonding curve. That is how it works. But again, we are only a few months old as an organization, so we expect to have revenue this year, but not as much, I guess, to have a competitive sell price.
I just add. So there's been price movement today. There was 1,000 ETH in the curve this morning, and so market cap is 10.6 million for I guess the free floating, and then including the pre-mint, that would be 40 million. But I guess just this morning passed with the free floating past 10 million market cap.
Okay.
And I suspect it is arbitrage happening off the curve into Uniswap. Basically, as the Uniswap price goes up, the curve price will sell. Like somebody's botted the curve to a Uniswap, so that buy up the curve. Yeah.
I guess the argument is either the DXdao is not receiving those funds, or like investors are getting like a bad deal when they're buying DXD. I'm trying, it's like I'm an arbitrage. Like who's losing out in the arb?
The buyer on Uniswap could have bought from the curve at a lower price, right? Because whoever is pushing that price up on Uniswap past the curve could have bought for lower on the curve directly, right? Like now it's a little bit complicated though with gas prices, because buying on two things costs more. Yeah, I don't know. I think the reason traders are maybe not like Ingemar, when you talk about that group, I mean, that just sounds like they just don't want inflation, right? Because inflation is just like dragging Uniswap price down, right? Like,
I think the discussion should be around funding and like planning for the DAO, and not the curve and not the prices. This will follow if we come to the conclusion that we have enough funding and we don't need or don't want to raise more funds, then we can figure out what we want to do. But yeah, I think that the main driver for the discussion right now is as you said, it's more like let's pump a DXD.
All my yield farms are not yielding enough. I need something else.
Yeah.
Where's my alpha? Yeah, I mean, I think that's maybe the motivation, but yeah, I mean, it's a totally valid question though. Like, how much should the DXdao raise, right? Like, I totally agree with Ken. Like, what? Yeah, like, I mean, what's our goals here? Like, where do we want this to be? By yourself.
I mean, ideally, we could like pause it and then turn it back on with no problem. But I don't really think there's a way. Like, you could turn it off indefinitely, like forever, or leave it on forever.
Generally, I think if you look at it, if you assume we're going to really scale and have a lot of revenue, I think it makes sense to somehow like selling DXD and giving a 10% of our revenue is a lot. You like companies raise funds for just selling bonds, giving like fixed how do you say, APY. So it's not the most efficient way to raise money. That's the bottom line. Selling DXD is not the most efficient way to raise money.
Given that we're pre-revenue, though, it probably is, right? Because I don't think, I mean, who would lend to the DXdao?
Yeah. That's obviously that's part of it. So the question is, do the DAO have enough funding until there's some revenue? And that's obviously no one can really answer this. So yeah, it's hard. I don't know if there's like a very easy conclusion right now. The only additional point is, as you said, that's we have a lot of DXD. Like the DAO has a lot of DXD. So if the price is high and the market is liquid, theoretically the DAO can just sell DXD when it needs funding.
Right. I mean, I think even though it's in relatively illiquid market, that DXD can't be thought of as cash or even like as ether. I don't really know what the difference is between minting new DXD on the curve and selling from the pre-mint on Mesa or whatever for additional funding, right? Like, I think essentially, whatever demand there would be for that, I mean, isn't it sort of the same thing, just a different avenue.
Well, you increase the overall supply,
Right.
at least on Etherscan.
I would think it'd actually be more effective to raise from selling out of the pre-mint because the supply is capped, right? Like,
yeah, it would just be several. I mean, I think it's selling pressure on DXD, and like it would make sense to not like the DXdao needs to be in a place where it feels comfortable, like funding operations through or funding things through just selling of DXD, and like I don't think that's the place right now. It's like you basically raise enough ETH to get you to that point where you can kind of like just manage the pre-mint. But like DXD has to be like much more liquid, hopefully much more worth much more, and have revenue into the curve and all of that.
I mean, if DXD does well, ETH does well, or like the products do well, their DXdao may never be in the position to need to sell more, right? Like, yeah. Especially, I mean, I don't know, maybe that's the question we should be asking is like, how much runway in ETH do we need now, right? Like, or whenever we pause the curve. It sort of gets back to a budgeting like projection, right? And a strategy question.
Yeah, and it's tough on the timeline, right? It's the DXdao raising funds for 5 years, 10 years, 2 years, and how are those funds? Yeah, but those are the strategic questions. So, cool. All right, I'm gonna.
Yeah, shall we wrap it up now?
Yeah,
I'm happy to answer any questions, but if everybody's set, we can just wrap up. All right.
Yeah.
Great. Thanks, everybody.
See you guys.
See you.
Bye-bye.